The assurance architecture was contractual, and the contract produced no real-time visibility into whether the code was being met. 24% of New Zealand organizations now rank staff AI misuse as a top 3 security risk, up from 16% last year. Nearly half have experienced a cyber attack. These two findings describe the same governance failure from opposite directions. One shows what happens when processing moves to a vendor your board cannot see. The other shows what happens when processing moves to tools your board has not authorized. Does your board have a complete map of every party currently processing sensitive data on its behalf?
Let's get into it.
In May 2026, the Office of the Privacy Commissioner delivered its Phase 1 findings on the ManageMyHealth breach, not a technical incident report, a structural verdict. This is the Hamberger report. I'm Andreas Hamberger, Enterprise Architect and Board Governance Practitioner, Wellington. 99,416 individuals had their health information compromised. The processor had no direct regulatory relationship with the Privacy Commissioner. Enforcement had to route through the primary controller, who was itself in breach and who had no real-time visibility into whether the processor was meeting its obligations. At the same time, Kordia's 2026 cybersecurity report landed a companion finding. 24% of New Zealand organizations now rank staff AI misuse as a top 3 security risk, up from 16% in 2025. Nearly half of surveyed organizations have experienced a cyber attack. These two findings describe the same governance failure from opposite directions. The Privacy Commissioner describes it from outside the organization. What happens when processing moves to a vendor your board cannot see? Kordia describes it from inside the organization. What happens when processing moves to AI tools your board has not authorized? Both are assurance blind spots. Both trace to the same architectural gap. Both land on the board. The Phase 1 report closes something open. It converts the ManageMyHealth incident from a data point about a breach into a formal regulatory finding about a governance architecture. The architectural implication is specific. The processor operated outside direct regulatory reach. No direct Privacy Commissioner jurisdiction existed over a party that handled health records for nearly 100,000 New Zealanders. The accountability chain required routing through the primary controller, who was itself in breach and who had no real-time visibility into processor compliance. A contract existed. Assurance did not. For directors, the translation is direct. Your organization processes data. Some of that processing is done by third parties under contract. For each of those contracts, ask, does that processor have a direct relationship with the relevant regulator? If the processor breaches its obligations, what is the enforcement path? Is there a mechanism in the contract that produces real-time compliance visibility, or does the contract simply state obligations that you have no way to verify are being met? A data processing agreement is not the same as a governance architecture. The Kordia finding on shadow AI is the internal equivalent of the third-party processor gap. When a staff member uses an AI tool the organization has not assessed or authorized, data moves to a processing environment the board cannot see. The organization may have contractual relationships with approved AI vendors. It has no contractual or governance relationship with the AI tools staff are using independently. The assurance blind spot is structurally identical to the processor gap. Processing is occurring, data is moving, and the governance layer has no line of sight. The 8 percentage point increase in AI misuse concern from 2025 to 2026 reflects a real operational shift. As frontier AI tools become accessible without enterprise procurement, the gap between what a board believes its data environment looks like and what it actually looks like expands. The compound risk is the intersection. An organization with a third-party processor gap on one side and a shadow AI gap on the other has two categories of processing it cannot see. If the governance architecture question is live in your organization right now, the Lethal by Design series launches on the Hamberger report on Friday, the 26th of June. It traces how the same accountability gap the Privacy Commissioner has just found in health data processing operates in the defense AI context. The architecture of ungoverned processing is identical regardless of the data type. From the 26th every Friday. There is a further layer, the Five-Country Council, with New Zealand's National Cybersecurity Advisory Body as co-author, published guidance on the 1st of May 2026 on careful adoption of agentic AI services. An agentic AI system does not merely process data you provided. It operates with delegated authority, accesses systems on behalf of users, and may invoke further tools and services in the course of completing a task. Each of those invocations creates a data processing relationship the organization may not have mapped. The processor gap the Privacy Commissioner identified in the ManageMyHealth context was visible in principle. ManageMyHealth knew it had engaged a processor. What it lacked was real-time compliance visibility. The agentic AI equivalent can be structurally invisible. An AI agent that invokes external tools or services may create data processing relationships the organization is not aware of and cannot audit. The Five-Country Council framing is precise. The concern is not that agentic AI is inherently unsafe. The concern is that indirect data access chains create governance blind spots that outpace the assurance architecture most organizations have in place. For boards already managing the processor accountability gap, the Privacy Commissioner has identified. The agentic context is the next instantiation of the same problem. 3 questions follow from the Privacy Commissioner finding and the Kordia data together. First, what processes sensitive data on your behalf? This is an existence question, not an adequacy question. Before a board can assess whether its third-party governance is adequate, it needs a complete map. Before a board can assess whether its third-party governance is adequate, it needs a complete map of what third parties hold or process personal, health, financial, or other sensitive information. Most organizations have incomplete maps. Second, what is the real-time compliance mechanism for each of those processes? A data processing agreement states obligations. It is not by itself an assurance mechanism. Assurance requires a mechanism by which non-compliance produces a signal before a breach occurs. For most processor relationships, no such mechanism exists. The Privacy Commissioner's finding is that this is not adequate. Third, where does AI processing occur? That is not covered by the first 2 questions. Staff using unauthorized AI tools are not captured by vendor contracts. The data processing is occurring outside the governance perimeter. Organizations within the Five Eyes grouping handle data processed through partner networks every day. The accountability architecture for those chains is not contractual. It is structural, built on mandatory supply chain transparency requirements, security accreditation regimes, and direct regulatory oversight of processes, regardless of affiliation. The Five-Country Council guidance on agentic AI applies the same architectural logic to the commercial context. Organizations that handle defense-adjacent data, including veterans' health records, personnel administration systems, or information subject to security classification by association, should read the Privacy Commissioner's Phase 1 finding as structural confirmation of what allied supply chain governance has always required. Accountability follows the data, not the contract. The 99,416 individuals affected include a disproportionate concentration of Māori health records. Earlier Cyber Sunday episodes documented that the breach was concentrated in Northland, a region with significantly higher Māori population proportions than the national average. Breaches affecting Māori health data carry a specific governance dimension that goes beyond Privacy Act compliance. The Raraunga, the Māori Data Sovereignty Network, frames health data as Taonga. It carries whakapapa, cultural identity, and community meaning that individual privacy frameworks alone do not capture. When a processor handling Māori health data has no direct regulatory relationship with the Privacy Commissioner, the accountability gap is not merely procedural, it is a gap in the governance architecture for Taonga. For boards governing organizations that hold or process Māori health data, the Phase 1 finding is not just a risk management signal. It is a governance obligation under the Kaitiakitanga framework to actively protect what is held in trust, not merely to contract its protection to a third party and assume the contract is sufficient. The direct liability reform the Privacy Commissioner has recommended would extend regulatory reach to processors Until that reform is enacted, the board is the governance mechanism. The New Zealand Cybersecurity Strategy 2026 to 2030 includes Action 8, the proposed civil pecuniary penalty instrument. The trajectory of regulatory consequence is moving in one direction, increasing liability for organizations that cannot demonstrate proactive governance. Action 8 is not yet enacted. The direction is established. For boards, the practical implication is timing. The governance gap the Phase 1 finding describes is a liability exposure that exists now under the current Privacy Act 2020 regime, not only under a future penalty framework. Section 123 of the Privacy Act 2020 allows the Human Rights Review Tribunal to award damages for interference with privacy, including distress and loss of dignity. Compliance notices are already in train from the Privacy Commissioner. The assurance architecture question is not a question about future regulation. It is a question about current fiduciary duty. The same week that the 5-country council warned that agentic AI creates indirect data access chains your governance architecture may not reach, the Privacy Commissioner confirmed that a processor handling health records for nearly 100,000 New Zealanders had no direct regulatory relationship with the body responsible for protecting those records. These are not separate signals. They are the same signal arriving from two directions. What is your organization's real-time compliance mechanism for the processes that hold your sensitive data? And when did a board director last verify it was working?
That is the Hamberger report for today. If this was useful, subscribe and hit the like button. It helps more professionals find the channel. You will find links to everything we covered in the description below. I am Andreas Hamberger, and I will see you tomorrow.
Like and subscribe.